Oh, it's got a little bit rusty. Done now. Well, we are live on YouTube too. So if that all works, we can just start our meeting. All right, let me share my screen. Where are we? Share screen. The Visual Studio. No. I think you should be seeing something of my screen.
I see a preview of Index.
You see a preview of the latest version of the FHIR spec. Yeah, that is what I've been working on last week, so that's okay. And let's get to our agenda for today. Get up. Wiki. So we have a new visitor. Well, not new for all of us, but we have Theo here. Hi, Theo. Welcome.
Hey, good morning and afternoon and evening to all of you.
Theo has been a FHIR user since a very long time and a long time .NET API user as well. So when he heard that we had this call, he wanted to join in and said, well, of course, you're more than welcome to do so.
Yeah, and my special interest is also towards the release for APIs and its availability.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, let's. You'll be happy to know that a big part of our agenda is about R4 anyway. So this is the agenda as it now stands. I hope you can all see it. We have a list of action items that we will go through, and then we will report on the R4 progress. It's quite a lot to report on that. Migrating FHIR, it's quite a lot to report on that. And maybe that's not on the agenda, but maybe we should spend a little bit of time on next Monday, which is supposed to be our new the release date for the new versions. So I will edit this for a second. Is there anything else on the agenda?
I think it's quite enough already, I think.
Yeah. But
Brian.
Yeah, the publication process.
Yeah, so that's this one.
Yeah, because we had a bit of chatter in San Antonio on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Good. So let's go through the action items. Marco.
Yeah, it's a nice action item, right? And it's still pending, I'm afraid. We had some work on the R4 alpha release before San Antonio, and we worked hard on that, and it's finished now, but we have a discussion about that later. And then it was San Antonio, and then I had some few days off to get to recover from San Antonio. So to be short, I didn't do anything about this section.
All right. Shall we keep it on the list?
Yep.
Okay. Ryan?
Still haven't done that, but we had that little short chat. I'm going to have a chat internal with some of our other guys, and that should hopefully happen in the next week or two.
Right. I know about that.
Yeah.
Cool. So we'll keep it there.
Yep.
Next thing, that's mine. A targeted meeting to discuss the different interfaces for the web API. Is that still something we need to do?
I think that we should do it, actually.
Still reasonable? Yeah. Okay, we'll keep it there. Creating a section on the API docs. Well, Brian, I think the same is true for you. It was San Antonio all the way, I guess, or did you get time to do that?
I definitely didn't get time to do anything. Just trying to remember what this particular one was.
For the section API and dealing with new data for normative member may get removed, added enums expanded upon it. So we probably, when we put this on, we thought about new data for normative parts of the POCOs. Yeah, I don't know if you. It's actually pretty hard. What happened? What happens? I don't know myself either anymore. Shall we just remove it?
Yeah, let's get rid of it.
If we don't know anymore what it is, then
Yeah.
schedule a meeting to show proposed change to the internals of the validator. That is definitely of interest, but I'm going to tell you this is going to get delayed because my priorities have changed. I'm going to first work on a mapping engine before I take on the validator. So this will certainly become active at some point again, but I'm not going to work on it quickly.
Yep. Do you want to say something about the mapping later on in the meeting, if we get time?
Sure, I'll put it here.
Yep.
Okay. Cherry pick relevant things from the R4 PR into SU2.
That's for Brian, isn't it? That's yours. No, still haven't done that. I've still got the code sitting there. I know exactly what needs to be done. And when I did a report of the FHIR tester, which maybe we could have a short look at if we get time. I stick that as a final bullet item.
Yeah, that would be nice if we have that before we publish the next version. So that is a little bit in a hurry. This one is actually pretty. If you don't mind, I'll put this on top because that's actually getting urgent now. Start discussion support for .NET 4. Actually, we discussed that, and we're not going to do it. We double checked with the community in San Antonio. So we'll just tell the guy to F off. Ewout will create a ticket to discuss static default for permissive parsing. Not done. And we'll announce move the Spark to Spark.kufu.no. I think that has happened, Kenneth.
Yeah, that happened.
Yeah, good.
Wow.
Good. All right. Those were the action items. So let's move on quickly to R4 progress. Shall I kick it off?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So a lot of work done by Brian at first, converting the models and so on. And since September, October, November, we already had the POCOs more or less working, parsing and serializing. But the other parts, say snapshot generation, validation, and so on, they were completely undone, leaving us with hundreds of failing unit tests. And Brian started polishing that until about 3 weeks ago, I think. And so last week, or actually the week before San Antonio, Marco and I fixed the last unit tests more or less. And those were hard. I mean, we all hoped, and Marco keeps on saying that sometimes you have this one change in your code and then suddenly 10 unit tests are fixed. Unfortunately, that was not the case this time around. We had to kill them one by one. And I was happy with the unit tests because they actually pointed us to things that had subtly changed in the R4 specification. So structure definition structurally has changed hardly, but there are some very subtle differences that are in the generated R4s, in the R4 structure definitions that were not obvious. Some of them I couldn't even remember talking about on the Monday FHIR calls, but anyway, they were there. And these may sound small, but these are the kind of things that tripped our validations and unit tests. Like, well, most of you are intimately familiar with structure definition, and a good example is that most structure definitions for the FHIR core types, in their first node in the structure definition, so the first element definition, that is the root, they were typed to have themselves as a type. So if you would go to observation and you would go to the first observation node in element definition in the structure definition, it would say type is observation, which is circular. Because you're going to define an observation, but then already you say that you're of type observation. I had special ifs for that in my code, and in R4 this is gone. So the root element definition in a structure definition no longer is typed with the same type as that structure definition is defining. Now that sounds small, but that triggered, of course, unexpected null reference exceptions everywhere. Well, and so that was what kept us busy for days. All these kind of little changes in the spec. Another one was the URL property for the extension. that used to be a FHIR type, and now it's a compiler type, just like the normal value attribute on all the primitive data types. So it's all these little things that don't reflect in the R3 to R4 diffs in the structure definition, but that causes pain. Nevertheless, job completed. All unit tests run. Marco integrated the R4 stuff in the build environment, the CI build. So on Thursday, I think, or even Wednesday, Marco was able to push the button and start producing an alpha build for R4 on our alpha stream on MyGet. And Marco also announced that on Zulp. We haven't broadly announced it further.
Twitter as well.
Twitter as well. That's right. The champagne bottle on Twitter. We had a glass of champagne after finishing R4. We need to celebrate more, is what we said. You know, we are always very good at telling where things are going wrong, but for now, we thought let's have some. So that's on Twitter, and the people in San Antonio, at least, yeah, quite a few people started using the library in San Antonio. So.
That was Brian.
That was Brian. Well, he knows about this. He was in San Antonio anyway. There he is
again.
But Kenneth, yeah, you were not there.
No.
So it's been taken in use, and Brian found one or two things that we might have to hotfix. So that would be the first time we actually have a hotfix. But that's well, hotfix it's still in alpha, so there's not really that's really not a problem. So that's our R4 progress. Two little things I have to admit are not done yet, because they were bigger changes, and one is the upgrade of the FHIR engine. Has less to do with R4, but has everything to do with the FHIR that FHIR itself is going normative. And FHIR has seen a lot of new features. So the old features are more or less still there, but there's lots of new features that I hadn't implemented yet. So I worked on that last week during the workgroup meeting, and it's not done yet, but we cover a lot of cases now, so we can just go on publishing. It's not a bottleneck if we have to.
Maybe you should also talk to the community about that. Last meeting we talked about it, that we want to have it included in the R4 branch, and now we are thinking about it to put it back to DST2, right?
Yeah, I talked about that with Brian too.
Oh, you already did. Okay.
Yeah, because I had the opportunity in San Antonio to face-to-face talk to Brian about this. A little bit of context. Last time around, indeed, we said, normally we build everything in DST2 and we merge everything forward, but the FHIR engine is the same for all versions. So it, in principle, shouldn't matter in which of the 4 branches we actually put it. But so let's put it in 4, mostly because the unit tests for FHIR were written in release 4. But I think it's going to be really confusing that we do 95% of our code, we merge from 2 to 3 to 4, and then this is in 4. That will cause problems. And now I have worked with the unit tests, I realized that it is way easier to just make the unit tests work on DST2 instance again. That's only maybe half an hour of work, and I think it will save us headaches from thinking about, oh yeah, hold on, FHIR is in 4 and the rest of the stuff is in 2, and so we think about pulling this back into DST2, so have FHIR in DST2. Really, it's independent of FHIR because it works on CQL, it works on anything, so it should definitely not be dependent on version of FHIR. So yeah, otherwise, Marco and I have been thinking long and hard about isolating common code. That is the last bullet, and we'll not get to that in the agenda today, but it's definitely still on our mind. There's one more thing that's not ready in R4, and that's a new feature in constraining choice types. So in R4 choice types, you can actually have constraints immediately on the type of instance in choice types. So observation.value X, you can start having constraints depending on the type of X without doing a type slice. That's a new R4 feature, and that required a little bit more work. So that's not done yet.
Actually, one thing with the R4, sorry, I had a little technical issue and it flipped through, but there is a pull request of mine. I don't think we've dealt with that yet. And that fixed there's some bogus messages you get back if you have reference types that are different.
Yep. While you were offline, Brian, I actually said to the rest that you had sort of a hot fix, and that's the one I was referring to. And I will apply that tomorrow.
Cool. Yep. And the other one, so
that's really oops. It's surprising that we didn't have a unit test for that yet, but you have added a unit test for that. Yeah. Good.
Yep. Whatever. One of the things that you'll want to implement is the resolve stuff. So a lot of the invariants use resolve to work out which version it is. I've got a nasty one that I've implemented in my server, which doesn't actually retrieve it. It just looks at the reference and works out what it was based on that and fakes one. So whether your server or whatever, so whether Vonk and Spark want to do something similar or actually resolve internally and pull it off disk. All the ones in the invariants don't actually care what it is, as in which particular one it is. They just care what type it is.
I know Marco spent a lot of time on that unit test.
Yeah.
Which one was that?
That was the resolve, the implementation of resolve in a static
with the FHIR path.
With the FHIR path engine, because that blocked that. We had big problems with that one.
Yeah, but it was something completely different.
Oh.
Well, the I have to think about what it was.
It was 2 weeks ago in San Antonio. Yeah.
I know
about the details myself too. It has to do with the fact that the FHIR path engine, you install a resolve function in the FHIR path engine, but you do that statically at startup time, and that ruined the other unit tests.
That was it. Yeah.
Because you can only install a resolve once, and so there was we had problems getting that done.
What the hell did I do then? I did something.
Yeah. So Marco changed it to actually.
That's right. Because I don't actually resolve. That's why I don't have a problem.
And that unit test was also 2 times in the code on two different files, and I removed one.
Yeah.
And I made it a bit more flexible, and then it worked.
Yeah, now it operates nicely with the other unit tests. I think Brian, it was because that unit test used to be all by itself, or it used to be the only unit test doing resolve in that assembly, and then it all worked well. But if you had other tests too, then it breaks all the other unit tests because it's installed a bogus resolve function.
Exactly.
So we had to work around that.
If you run it only on that in that solution, then in that project it worked well. But if you run it all the unit tests, and it didn't work.
Yeah,
and that's how a CI build does, and it broke.
Cool.
If you run it in isolation, it worked, but in the CI build, it didn't. Right, no. That's it. But Marco fixed that, so don't worry about that. It's okay. Yeah, it's okay now.
Cool.
So that's our R4 progress. Actually, quite a lot. We're more or less. We are ahead of, I think, where I had hoped we would be. So I'm very happy about that.
So we are now in alpha, and we have some hot fixes to do. So that means another alpha again, or what should we do that because?
Yeah. So Brian's fix, that is really something we need to fix. It's really a bug in the code.
Mm-hmm.
And if I do that this week, we have another alpha.
Mm-hmm.
And.
So I actually reckon that's pre-release ready to push out to NuGet.
Yeah, actually,
my testing with it.
That is point 4 in the agenda, and Marco has already done point 3, migrating FHIR path back to migrating FHIR path out of the STU234 branch into a single repo is slightly different, but we do it in steps. We're going to move it first back to the STU2.
Mm-hmm.
And then this agenda point will mix nicely with the last bullet, how to start working on isolating POCO-dependent code. So FHIR is not different from, say, our new serializers, which are also POCO independent and DSTU2 independent. So we need an integrated approach to isolate that code in sort of a separate repository. Marco and I have been looking at submodules in Git, but if you really start Googling about that, people are not too happy about submodules. But our current system, where we manually have to make sure that we have exact copies of that stuff across all the release branches, is also not the ultimate solution. So we're still trying to figure out what's best. Maybe even with the disadvantages, having that stuff out in a submodule in Git could work for us, but we really have to try that out.
So thinking now, I was also thinking that maybe the Microsoft guys can help us with this approach.
That's a good idea.
Maybe they have, of course, they have experience with this. And maybe they can give us pointers what to do.
Yeah. Last time they offered, and then you said that you fixed it in Vonk. So then we were like, okay, that's fine then.
Yeah, that's true. Oh yeah, that's true.
We'll ask them again. Don't worry. Yeah. One thing we can do, and I talked with Marco, is at least that we have all the common code in, say, a common subdirectory called common, and that we know that we can blindly copy that from branch to branch without having to think about it. And maybe even we could automate that in such a way that for every check-in or whatever, this stuff gets copied over to the rest. I don't know. I want something to be sure that you don't have to worry that the common stuff is really unchanged from branch to branch. Submodules might be a way to do that, but we'll have to see. Do you have any experience with that, Theo?
Sorry. What was your question?
Well, especially if you have a big code base, which multiple branches across multiple versions,
Okay.
and you have a shared code base in between those versions, it looks like something like Git submodules might work.
Yeah,
but
I haven't used that. No.
No, and if you start Googling about that, people are complaining about it, that it's not good enough. So since you have been managing pretty large code bases, I wondered if you had any experience with isolating libraries that are like FHIR that are completely shared by 3 or 4 different versions of a project.
Yeah, no. I mean, having a separate repository, of course, is helpful, but creates more management, or you have to deal with it as well. So no, I'm not sure.
That's okay. At least then we're not doing double work. If any of us already would say, well, this is the solution, then we could easily follow that path.
Yeah, all right.
Okay, next one. Or is there anything more on the R4 progress before I go on? Not really, yeah? Okay, good, excellent. Well, there's a lot of people waiting for it. I mean, no, a lot of people are asking when R4 is ready, which is different than I need to know tomorrow. But I was being asked at the San Antonio meeting about our roadmap. So we have to, now we have an alpha release, so we kept it a little bit under the radar, but I think when we publish the first version, we have to make more clear that the R4 is here. I had some of the Connected Phone participants come back to me saying that they successfully integrated the R4 stuff into their software. So that's
how did they grab it? Did they grab the right one?
They grabbed the alpha from the alpha stream.
Oh, good.
Yeah, you mean you're afraid that they were grabbing 0.96, the old one in September?
Yeah.
Yeah, no. I was with them. I pointed them out to the alpha stream, so they have been using the correct version. Yeah.
I'm just nervous people accidentally grabbing. I know I've configured it onto my machine, and I'm just manually ticking that box, grabbing the stuff, and then unticking it, so I don't accidentally grab it.
Yeah. Well, these people are actually using always the latest version of R4 because they need some of these resources that have been in flux The genomics kind of things, and so they would immediately see it when they pick the old version, because that doesn't have the latest and the greatest of the December fix. So yeah. Okay. Publication on Monday. Let me see. So next Monday is our once in the 6-week publication date. And there are a few things I think we need to have done before we actually publish. And I'd like to grab the, let's see, start up another GitHub pull requests for a sec to see what we need to pull. So we are at version 1.1. Let's see what our current version that is published is. I think 1.0 in final and 1.1 in beta. So if we go by our schedule, 1.1 will become final and we go to 1.2 beta. And just to set the scene here, you know what? I'll take Notepad, for example. 1.0. The big thing is, of course, that was 1.0. So it introduced the Poco-less parsers, more or less. That was the big thing. 1.1 was lots of bug fixes.
Yeah.
And 1.2 has R4. And it might have some of the pull requests that I just want to take a look at before we go on. And so let's take a look at the pull requests.
There are two minor ones. The first one is just documentation. The second one is a very small one.
Yeah, the path index spec out of spec change. It's interesting. This is one of the items I marked as byte size, and this guy actually referred to it and said, "Whoa, I like to do a byte size thing." So he did this, which is nice. I will definitely pull it. That's a no-brainer. Then develop our 4 Brian fixes. This is Brian. This is the hotfix we've just been talking about, right? This is with the
so there was one change that needed to be cherry-picked back to 2. The rest of it is all 4.0 only.
In this pull request. So in this pull request are also the STU2 things that need to be
There's
to the
one change in there.
Yeah.
I
remember.
Yeah.
And this is separate from the action item that there was some things to pull back from your general R4 thing. So that's still an open.
Yeah, that's separate.
Okay. Then there is a fix that I need to apply.
That's from Microsoft.
From Microsoft. Yeah, Brendan Coates from Microsoft found a mistake in our JSON serializer.
Also not so very big.
Not a very big one. Now, the interesting thing is, of course, if we want to have this is a bug that we could fix in 1.2. So it would be published as 1.2 beta, or we could apply it as a hotfix to 1.1. So it will become in the final version of 1.1. That is
Why should we do that? Because if they wait 6 weeks later, then it comes automatically in 1.1.
Yeah. Well, what is a hotfix or what's not depends on whether something. It's a pretty big mistake.
Okay, if it's a really big mistake, then we should make it.
Yeah. It's interesting that we didn't encounter it. Not Net4 compatibility we talked about. I'm not going to do that. No code found in instance is an independent feature. I improved terminology validation. It's a nice feature, but I had to change quite a few things to make this happen. So I would not mind if I just don't do this and this would become part of 1.3. It depends on how much time I have left this week to get the publication next week ready. And then the last 2 ones, this is a very interesting pull request by Michel, but it's huge. So as you can see, this is from October 29th. This is the point with these kind of pull requests that are like hail, and they shoot at tens and tens of C# files. I'm reluctant to pull them because it's a lot of work to see what actually has been done. So it just keeps sitting there, which I don't like. But
I have some, on the parser settings, I think I had a look through some of that, and I think there were some inconsistencies in the naming in the parser settings as he was passing stuff around. I think I had a look.
Yeah. And I think a pull request that I did that you don't see here because it's closed already fixes that too. That is a pull request by George. George is not with us today because he is ill. But he fixed a bug that we have to talk about a little bit. So I'll do that here and call it George's bug for a second. It's worth talking about. And then finally, the replatform FHIR client and HTTP client. That's a big new feature that Marco's going to work on after R4 is done.
Yeah, cool.
So that's it for the pull requests. Not too much going on. Okay. Issue-wise, I mean, well, here's the bug with the -1. That was the byte size fix that we have. Setting empty meta object breaks JSON serialization. That's the Microsoft bug.
Yep.
And then this bug, problem invariant of range 2 by Alexander Hinkit, that has to do with the fact that the ESU3 spec had an invariant that's on quantities, so saying observation.value, where if it was a quantity, the one or a range, so the upper and the lower limit for an observation, that the lower should always be lower than the higher, but that was on quantity, and comparing quantities was undefined in the ESU3. So it's a bug in some ways, but it's a bug that it was actually in the FHIR spec. And it will be fixed when my new FHIR path engine gets fixed. So I'm not in a hurry to.
Is that one of the ones you found when you changed, or you found that issue with the don't accept types of collection and collection?
Well, no, we found this longer before. This is from the November 26th.
Yeah.
And this is just in the ESU3, comparing quantities in FHIR path was undefined.
Yeah, because I remember seeing this one just in the last week or two.
Yeah.
And it was showing me it was exactly that issue, but it was saying you can't operation on collection and collection.
Yeah, I improved the error messages for the FHIR path engine as well. It will now actually say I cannot. This will now say I cannot do the comparison operation greater than on quantities. That's what the error message will now say. It's much clearer than it was.
Awesome.
But the underlying problem, the underlying problem, I have fixed that too now because I have introduced quantities in the FHIR path engine. That was a big thing, of course, but our FHIR path engine knows about quantities now. So this problem will just go away. So bug-wise, we're pretty much okay too. The rest is features. I mean, there will always be lots of features, of course, in the queue. Okay, now let's get back to this. Here.
Sorry.
This also, and I'll add this too, stricter parsing. That's important for now. So where are we? Currently 1.0 is in final and 1.1 is in beta. And this Monday, we will go to 1.1 in final and 1.2 in beta. Okay.
That's something I wanted to talk about in terms of pushing something to final should be a decision we make to say, is this better than what was there? I think it's just automatically jumping up the likes of the stricter parsing. And do we think that's something that, because we've had a few talks about this, and the likes of those other suggestions we've had around maybe letting that empty or no child invariant through, because that's going to trip over a lot of people.
Yeah. But that's in 1.1 beta now, right? 1.1 beta and 1.0, by the way, all had stricter parsing, and that means that I actually enforce the rules that are in the FHIR spec. There's actually a lot of rules we didn't enforce yet, but one of the things that are most painful then, or that's the only one, Brian, you are talking about, is the fact that I no longer allow you to have totally empty nodes. So the FHIR parser will complain about that. Because
So
if you
not
look
the
at the
validator,
serialization,
that's the parser.
no,
Yeah.
no, it's the parser, because that's what it says in the serialization format. It's not a structure definition thing, which is what the validator does. This is in the definition of the XML and JSON formats. So that's why I put it in the parsers. Nevertheless, it's a behavioral change from 0 to 9 to 1.0. 1.0, you know, I got structure in 1.0. And I thought I was able to, I could do that in 1.0. But what we forgot about, or what we didn't do, is that I introduced a setting called lenient parsing, I think, or permissive parsing.
Yep.
But that's only on the lower level parsers. So if you're working with POCOs, you can't really set that.
Not until my pull request from the stuff I have to do goes through.
Yeah, and the George's bug that you see there between quotes, it also has a fix for that.
Great. Yeah.
So in any case, it gets fixed because that was a mistake. So what we have to decide on here is if we go to final, if we do 1.1 final, do we want this? Well, it's actually a simple discussion. Do we want this fixed? Well, there's two things. One is one is, of course, is the fact that you can't say permissive parsing on the POCO so painful that we need to get it in a hot fix on 1.1 before we go final? Well, actually, that's the question. That's my main question.
Or do we leave leave 1.1 as the current stable? Because it's really just, so final is the current stable build, right?
Yeah. And currently 1.1, 1.0 is the current stable.
Okay.
And so 1.1 is definitely better than 1.0 because we fixed about 20 bugs in 1.1.
So 1.0, which is the current prod, just as bad. So pushing the bug fix is no big deal.
That's right. Really 1.0 introduced a stricter parsing.
Yeah. I think the content that's in my pull request is the only thing for me that's short on me saying that, use that for an R4 final or R4 beta. But I think that's what's going to happen anyway, right? 1.2 will become the beta.
1.2 will become a beta, yeah.
But we won't have an R4. We shouldn't have an R4 final then, should we?
We don't have an R4 final. R4 is completely alpha currently. So we can still fix that bug that you found on the alphas, and it will never get visible in any kind of beta. So I'm absolutely going to do this week is fix the R4 bug reported by Brian.
Yep.
That's the references bug.
Yep.
We'll do that before we publish any kind of beta from R4 because that's a bad one.
Because there is an R4 beta out there. It's just the September Connectathon build.
Yeah.
That's what's confusing.
Yeah, so
if we get anything out there, the better.
The 0.96, is that the
0.96, yeah.
I don't even know. Yeah, it's at least that one. Yeah.
Well, no, it was not. That has been used for a long time. It has the parsers and the serializers, but that's the last thing we did. And on Monday we get the first real beta from R4.
So it's going to be the 1.2 beta for the R4.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm happy for that to go out.
Before we have that, we have to fix the bug, the pull request for Brian.
But it's doable.
Yeah, it's doable, but we have to be clear about that. Okay, so
on
Monday everything is leveled again. Everything we have the DS2, S23, and R4 on 1.2 beta.
Absolutely, that's the whole
idea. The first
idea.
time we have that. Okay, right.
Yeah. So we were in an exceptional situation where we did not publish R4, and now we do. So we get back to normal business. So the Microsoft beta bug, the fix for the R4 bug. So this will still get in because it's now an alpha. So anyway, but the Microsoft Meta bug, I think I will do as a hotfix for the current 1.1 beta, so it doesn't get into the 1.1 final.
So just to have everything clear, after 6 weeks from Monday, we have the first final of the R4.
Yep.
Okay. So that would be the 1-2 final
1-2
in 6
final.
weeks somewhere in March.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Good to know for everybody, because that is the one they can go to use officially.
Yeah. When the good thing, of course, is that our that's for R4, right? And the other good thing, of course, is that our 1.1 beta that we now have has been tested by Microsoft in their product now. And I think it's also tested in Vonk. And it's also tested in SQL and FHIR by Brian. So 1.1 actually got quite some beating up by now.
No, not in Vonk.
What is it in Vonk then?
In production, we still have 0.96.
Oh, it's in production. Yeah.
Yeah. And we are now, this week, we're going to have 1.0 in it.
Okay.
So, no, not the 1.1.
No, but 1.0. Yeah, 1.1 was just a bug fix release, so nothing new came into 1.1.
Yeah.
So that's okay.
Because I ran the connectathon on my R4 build.
Yeah.
And so that's had probably 40,000 resources go through it.
Yeah. And your server had the stuff that was in the big R4 pull request that Marco and I worked on before we published R4. So
yeah.
Okay, fine, good.
I can't believe how well the validator worked.
Good, yeah, that was thanks to unit tests. Let's say it. Oh yeah, there is a final here, of course, the POCO permissive parsing.
Yeah.
So I think this needs a hotfix too before we go to 1.1 final, because this is really painful, as Brian has pointed out. Because 1.0 introduced stricter parsing, but there's no way to turn it off.
Yeah.
Brian this morning actually told me that he liked maybe to have even more granular switches, but is that something that's not something we need to in a hotfix, do we, Brian?
No. Okay. I'll try after I've gotten those changes through from that other pull request, the bits that I need to bring across. I'll give that another run in the 5-path tester and see if that's made stuff okay.
Okay, good. Okay. Now, then I want to draw you, then we'll do it like this for the 1.1 and 1.1 final. Now I want to attract your attention to 1.2 for a second. So that is this Monday going in beta. Now 1.2 is even less permissive. Because 1.2 will also now do stricter validation on stuff that you can only do when you have type information. And this mainly includes something that we have always let slip through, which is that if, for example, in JSON, if you have a repeating field, our parsers would not enforce that people use an array there. So you could say patient.name.family, which I think repeats, and then Kramer without doing actually, begin array Kramer, which according to the JSON serialization is required. Additionally, it knows which fields are XHTML, so it will actually validate that it contains XHTML. So these are additional constraints that may cause even more instances that we now allow to fail. With this permissive parsing, of course, you can go back to the old situation. So there is always this backdoor, but in general, I had some internal discussions here with the others. Like, okay, so this is obviously breaking in some ways. Then again, it was a bug that we ever allowed this. So I'd like to know what your opinions are on. Are we getting into are we getting in on thin ice by increasing the number of validations or the number of checks we do on the instance data?
So we get more. It's going to be more strict, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And that it's according to the specs. So we are following the spec even better.
Yeah. So that's why I especially mentioned the JSON array thing. That is obviously just wrong that we allowed that.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say it was wrong. I think we were being generous, but when we were writing it, we were always being correct.
Yep.
So we were happily taking stuff that wasn't exactly right and fixing it. But yeah, I agree it was wrong. But it was sort of like recovering from something that was recoverable. But yeah.
It is recoverable, and I think if you activate permissive parsing, it will allow you that again.
The funny part is for the FHIR tester, that's actually how I detect which versions it supports. It allows the parse to run through, loads the resource into all 3 versions, and the ones it allows through, it says, okay, well, that is a valid one of those instances. Doesn't mean it necessarily validates, but it serializes. So as long as it doesn't have properties that don't have the right name, or they're a wrong type from a serialization perspective, then that would trip it up. Having extra properties that don't exist, should trip it up. But I know it's not perfect, but it was.
And the extra properties that was luckily already there in the POCOs with allow unknown members and so on. It's just all the extra syntactic checks that broke your code, right, Brian?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
But just do we feel if we keep permissive parsing there and we can tell everyone, okay, just switch on permissive parsing, are we okay that we in 1.2 have additional checks again? Because it was actually again due to a bug that we didn't do all the checks.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, as we add the checks in, maybe we just need to consider them and say, should this be a separate setting or is it okay under one of the existing ones?
Yeah. So we have the beta time frame more or less to figure out whether we need more fine-grained control.
Yeah.
It's just that then in 6 weeks we'll have the same discussion, because normally we don't change the beta anymore. Because so if in the next 6 weeks we determine that we want more fine-grained control, it will only be in 1.3 that you'll have that fine-grained control.
Mm-hmm.
In 12 weeks.
Yeah.
Get it in beta though.
Yeah. Yeah, we have not yet do a procedure. We might maybe at some point where we say, well, we want to we instead of publishing a new dot version, we publish a new beta.
Yeah. Because that would just be then saying, okay, we're not going to. It's either do we do another better version or do we just not update the final?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's probably more likely.
Well, these are the kind of things you'd like to do when you do a major functional update, which we did in 1.0 with the whole parsing and serialization. If you do, your normal regular off-the-mill updates, this won't happen. It's every time we introduce new components with really new functionality that you are like, okay, now I've got some real testing, and actually I don't want the beta to go final because we have some real feedback on it, which might not be hotfix, but just functional changes.
Yeah.
So. Maybe we have to figure that out in the next 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to attract your attention to that. So we'll go on. Hotfix. This is what I'll do this week. I fixed the Microsoft bug as a hotfix in 1.1.
So we got a 1.1.1.
So we get a 1.1.1.
Okay.
Yep. Brian, I fixed your R4 bug in the alpha. That doesn't have any real consequences except for the fact that before Monday and before we have our first beta with R4, that gets fixed.
Yep.
I'll do a permissive parsing hotfix. So the 1.1 final will have this feature in the POCO side of things.
Yep.
And we'll use the next 6 weeks. to figure out whether we need finer-grained control over the syntactic validations, because they're all syntactic validations introduced by 1.2, which is under George's bug. So the bug George has to fix was a crashing vonk, because the parser allowed in JSON, any kind of XML or XHTML or whatever. You could have hello in your XHTML in JSON. And that got fixed, but that fixed a whole other bugs. So it's not only the syntactic validations, also plus performance. I'm doing more checks, and more checks means a penalty for performance. There's hardly something that I can do about that. But I think it should be okay, because the POCO parser itself did it itself also, but then later. So I'm not sure this is worse for performance, because it's the checks that were done by the POCO in the POCO layer are now being done by the I-typed element reader layer. So they've moved a little bit. But anyway, I like to point you out to that.
Yeah, just the final version of R4 that I ran through. Happy with the performance of the serializers and stuff. So I think it's up to where, how I had some issues with the earlier build. I think it's up to as good as or better than it was.
Excellent. Yeah. All right, that was publication on Monday. Mapping engine. We have a commercial product, a commercial customer now that needs mapping. So we're going to work on a mapping engine, but it's part of a commercial project. So we have not decided whether that's going to be part of the
publication. The only thing I would have asked, if you were going to make any of it available as an open part, is the parser that turns that funky format that Graham's got into the structure.
To a mapping, structure map resource. Yeah, we're actually that's going to be the last part of the. Yeah, that's going to be the last part of the project, because the customer creates structure maps by hand. Doesn't even. Yeah.
So not using that funky new thing, is actually starting from that instance format.
Yeah, but I don't think voluntarily, but that's because there was no parser available. I think if there would have been a parser, he would have used that language, but this is a smart client, and they actually, I think they sort of create these maps from their internal structure.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, the last word hasn't been said on that, but so that is something I am going to work on, which will take a bit of my time. So that's certainly something that's going to be felt.
Okay. Well, that's good news, because I've been occasionally trying to get back and do that, reading that mapping language into the structure map resource. So if you're not looking at that, I may continue with that effort. Yeah.
One thing this will result in for the public API is that what I will add to the public API is better ways to create in memory stuff that implements I-typed element, because it's pretty hard now. That's now mostly read only. So we'll probably get something like an element tree or something that implements I-typed element, and that you can use to construct in memory data that is typed. And that's pretty useful for a lot of projects. So I'm happy that
and for unit testing maybe.
And for unit testing, absolutely, because we have to depend less on XML files. We can construct unit test data in memory and then run it on that. You're absolutely right, Marco. Marco wants to improve the unit tests of the .NET API because he thinks they depend a lot of very specific XML and JSON files, which every single time we move from one platform or one version to another, we have to fix by hand, which is true.
I just want to avoid the same work again for the R5. That's why.
Well, fortunately, a lot of it's patient, which is normative.
That's true.
To definition. And Yeah.
But the most painful ones is always questionnaire, and it's still not normative. I hope Lloyd is going to stay off now, and he's been tuning that thing for a long time. So I hope questionnaire is going to be stable now.
Yeah, it should be pretty good. Spending a lot of time in it, so
yeah
I hope it's getting quite stable.
Yeah. And then we have the last 3 bullets here. We have only 3 minutes left. Well, let me. I think this is something that is at least on our minds. We've already started discussing that a little bit. How to start working on isolating Pogo-dependent code.
I think already Georgia is also working.
Georgia is already started working on that. So George is going over all our C# files and identifying which code is and is not dependent on a specific version of FHIR, which is very useful, because once we isolate that in a separate projects and separate assemblies, we can better manage it.
Yep.
So we've started on that. As I said, I don't know what the final word is on having subrepos or whatever, but at least we can start by separating out the things that don't change from FHIR release to FHIR release.
Yep.
Into a separate recognizable directory. So all those projects maybe will be on the common or whatever, so we know that's there. That also helps with submodules in Git, because you have to appoint a directory in your source code and say that stuff is actually in a separate repo, and that we can do if we start moving our projects to. There's a lot of details in discussion, like where to eat dependent code, but that's we're gonna figure it out as we go. All right, that's it for now, I think. Anyone else has something to bring to the table?
No, not right now. Thanks. Thanks all.
Yeah. All right, then see you in 2 weeks again. Oh, well, there's one big thing. Sorry. Yes, I forgot a very important thing. I'm sorry. Our meeting times.
Oh yeah, we talked about that on Monday.
Yeah. Yep. We have people from the US who want to join now. So we had a request to change it to, let me see, 2 EST. Brian, was that right?
Let's have a look at that.
8 p.m. Central European. I think you offered to get out of bed earlier. What is it? Yeah, I think that's early for you, right?
6 o'clock time slot or the 5 o'clock time slot?
I'm afraid that's no. I think it's 6 your time. 2 EST. It's 1 hour earlier than, say, the FHIR call.
Check.
You had this nice overview on this.
Yeah.
What was it
I'm
again?
just grabbing my calendar because I can see.
Yeah, that one. Time, whatever.
This one. This is the best one. So we have Amsterdam. We
US
have, say, Boston.
2
which
is
is
6.
East Coast.
Yeah, that's
and we have Melbourne, right?
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. So left column is Amsterdam. So 8 o'clock is 6 yours.
Yeah, that's okay.
Oh my God.
So I assume that maybe for the European callers, the evening time is not so convenient. So is this something we would alternate, or do we do it every time?
For me, it's not the real problem, but maybe for others. But...
Well, I definitely want to hear about Kenneth and Theo too.
Yeah.
Let's see how it works out.
If it needs be, it needs be.
Because you're doing the 11 a.m. till 12 p.m. slot right now, which is mine 9 till 10 p.m. So this will shift to a 6 till 7 a.m. for me and an 8 till 9 p.m. for you.
Yeah. And Boston is 5, which I would say, well, fine is a big word, but that means 1 or 2 o'clock West Coast, which is of course the problem for our Microsoft friends. 2 a.m. So at the work group meeting, we said we're going to look at 8 o'clock, but I'm fine doing it. So we can do next time the 8 o'clock my time slot.
Or alternate it, right?
And alternate.
It's also fine. Yeah.
I'm going to change the calendar. So for next time, we're going to do 8 o'clock in the evening for us. So 2 EST. So that would be a different time. And then afterwards, it's this time again, and we're just going to alternate. I think that's best.
Yeah.
It's no fun for Europeans still to work in the evening. So.
Or for Brian. It's for nobody's fun, right?
Oh, yeah. And for that time,
it's for nobody.
Actually, it's just okay for the US. I mean, without the US, we wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we can see whether people actually show up on the US.
Yeah. By the way, if they are not there, then
if they're not there, we're just switching back to this. To this. All right. That was what I wanted to say before we really said goodbye.
Yeah.
So, thank you all.
So next Monday is this slot still?
So next Monday in 2 weeks, we're going to that other slot.
The 6
okay.
o'clock York.
The other one is, so is that going to the Sunday morning?
No, so we keep one just like we're doing now.
Yep.
And the other is Monday 8 here, which is Tuesday morning for you.
Cool.
So no working on Sundays here.
Good. That's just what I was checking.
Fine.
Very early.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the same thing with some of the US meetings are the Friday afternoon, which is like our Saturday morning. You're like, nah, don't think so. Yeah.
No.
All right. Well, talk to you later then. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.
Zoom.